I will never forget that image of him doing that. We do a run-through of it from beginning to end with the guitar opening, as we all know.
Jimmy Page, a breakthrough musician and the brains behind Led Zeppelin's famous riffs, enchanted listeners with his innovative music. For decades, the rock genre was shaped by his charm and brilliance, which made him a legend. A more disturbing truth, however, existed underneath the legendary reputation and spectacular performances. Page had a secret battle going on behind the scenes that he kept concealed for years, even though he was publicly successful. Details on the severity of his drug struggle have now come to light, and they are alarming. In the height of Led Zeppelin's popularity, what was actually happening behind the scenes? How did the guy who ushered in a new age of rock music be affected by these unseen challenges? If the truth comes out, you might never look at this rock hero the same way again. Shall we begin? Rock legend. Jimmy Page's upbringing was far different from the carefree rock and roll lifestyle he would eventually lead. Jimmy grew up in a post-war Britain that was still finding its footing. He was born on January 9, 1944, in the little village of Heston in the county of Middlesex, England. James Patrick Page is his full name, and he displayed characteristics of an inquisitive and imaginative mind from a young age. His mom, Patricia, was a doctor's secretary, and dad, James Page, was an industrial people manager. Even though they were your average middle-class family, little Jimmy seems preoccupied with other things. During his formative years, his family relocated many times before landing in Epsom, Surrey, a location that would have a profound impact on his life's trajectory. Jimmy, a shy and introverted young man, spent a lot of time thinking. Jimmy, in contrast to other kids his age, preferred to spend his days indoors, where he could freely use his imagination. The arts and music which captivated him would later become the bedrock of his existence. However, music didn't start to dominate his life until he was about 12 years old. The Page family was formerly graced by the presence of a guitar, which had been abandoned by an earlier occupant. Something about the antique acoustic guitar, which had a Spanish design, drew Jimmy in. With little to no prior experience, he grabbed it up and started strumming. However, it was irrelevant. He was immediately enthralled by the noises and got fixated on discovering more. A cultural revolution was taking place in England at that period. The nation was enthralled by the skiffle trend, a fusion of folk, jazz, and blues. A new generation of young people was assembling garage bands after picking up guitars. This movement influenced Jimmy and countless others. He became obsessed with skiffle music and listened to artists like Lonnie Donegan on the radio. His subsequent career was shaped by these early inspirations. Jimmy's parents encouraged his budding musical career once they saw his enthusiasm. They set up classes and purchased him a used guitar, which was his first instrument of its kind. On the other hand, Jimmy's instructor saw early on that he preferred freestyle guitar playing to more structured sessions. Even as a child, his skill was obvious, and he yearned to express himself via music. When Jimmy was just a teenager, he began performing at talent shows and school functions. As a shy boy with incredible guitar abilities, he became famous. Unfortunately, his academic achievements started to take a second seat as his involvement with music grew. Rather than focusing on his schoolwork, Jimmy's attention frequently went to ideas about music. The same fears and doubts that plagued most teens persisted even as Jimmy's enthusiasm grew. Could he truly support himself as a guitarist, despite how much he loved the instrument? His parents were apprehensive, yet supportive. They wished for a secure future for Jimmy, but he had his sights set on a career in music. He carried this inner struggle for some time. Could he make a living doing what he loved, or would he be stuck with more traditional options? The tragic events surrounding Jimmy Page's life have recently come to light, so stay tuned as we explore them more. Jimmy Page's affinity with the guitar developed from a subtle interest into a burning desire. When little Jimmy found the guitar that had been left behind by an earlier renter, he dove headfirst into learning to play. He started teaching himself, primarily by ear, when he was 12 years old. Right from the outset, his innate skill shone through. Not long after, he persuaded his parents to get him a guitar, a beloved vintage Hofner, that he could call his own. In the early 1950s, when rock and roll was sweeping the globe, Jimmy was captivated by the rousing music of Scotty Moore and Chuck Berry. The riffs and rhythms he heard on recordings would captivate him, and he would spend hours attempting to imitate them. Jimmy, though, wasn't only mimicking, he was inventing. He was already experimenting with guitar sounds and genres as a youngster, giving his music a distinctive tone. He got his start in the music business by playing in bands in the Epsom, Surrey area. Before he was even 14 years old, Jimmy was already playing in semi-professional bands, one of which being Neil Christian and the Crusaders. This band gave Jimmy his first experience of touring, playing in clubs and dance halls all throughout England. His style was greatly influenced by these early performances. In the process of becoming a rock icon, he mastered the art of captivating crowds and honing the stage presence that would define him. But being a teenager on the road wasn't easy. Because of all the traveling and long hours, Jimmy's health started to deteriorate. He had to take a hiatus from performing when he got quite sick with glandular fever. He was able to think about his future during this break from performing. Jimmy devoted himself to his education and enrolled at Sutton Art College to become a painter. However, the allure of music was too much, and he quickly went back to playing guitar. For any aspiring musician in the early 1960s, London was the place to be, since the British music scene was blossoming. Jimmy began his career as a session guitarist, where he honed his craft and made valuable contacts in the business. Seen on albums by Marianne Faithfull, The Rolling Stones, and The Who, he swiftly rose to the position of most in-demand session musician in London. The producers like him because of his versatility and improvisational skills. However, Jimmy yearned for a more fulfilling experience, one that allowed him to fully express himself, despite his enjoyment of the session job. He was given that chance in 1966 when he became a member of the groundbreaking band, the Yardbirds. Jimmy started the band as a bassist, but he quickly transitioned to lead guitar and formed a partnership with Jeff Beck, another guitarist. Their powerful, dynamic sound was revolutionary for rock music in its day. Although Jimmy's stint with the Yardbirds was short, it had a profound impact. Through his explorations with feedback, distortion, and alternative guitar tunings, he invigorated the band's creative process. Songs such as Happenings 10 Years Time Ago demonstrated his talent for fusing psychedelic rock with blues, laying the foundation for his distinctive sound. Despite their fame, the Yardbirds broke up in 1968 due to internal strife and frequent lineup changes. This, however, was just the beginning of Jimmy's adventure. Actually, his tenure with the Yardbirds was formative for his subsequent work with Led Zeppelin, widely regarded as one of the most influential rock bands of all time. Jimmy was hell-bent on forming a new band to elevate his music to new heights after the Yardbirds broke up. Robert Plant, John Bonham, and John Paul Jones were the perfect musicians to join him, so he set out to get them. What gave rise to this new band, then? To alter the trajectory of rock music irrevocably. Therein lies the foundation of Led Zeppelin's history. Jimmy Page had an idea for a new band that would revolutionize rock music. This was the beginning of Led Zeppelin. Page was resolute in his desire to form a band capable of capturing the revolutionary sound and explosive energy he had imagined when the Yardbirds broke up in 1968. He embarked on a quest to assemble the ideal team to realize his dream. It was critical, Page realized, to put together the perfect lineup. Robert Plant, a commanding voice renowned for his extraordinary range and charisma on stage, was approached by him. Band of Joy's frontman, Plant, was captivated by Page's ideas and consented to join him. John Bonham, a drummer known for his perfect rhythm and booming rhythms, was the next artist Page recruited. Bonham was a no-brainer for the band because of his legendary drumming reputation in the music industry. Page completed the lineup with the addition of John Paul Jones, a gifted musician who could play keyboards, bass, and compose songs. Jones's adaptability complemented the band's daring style. Led Zeppelin was established when they joined forces. The first time they performed at an English university under this moniker was on October 7, 1968, at the University of Surrey. Right once, there was a palpable electric energy among the group's members. Their synergistic abilities resulted in an unprecedentedly robust and complex sound. The ascent of Led Zeppelin began with the publication of their self-titled first album in January of 1969. The album's innovative fusion of psychedelic, rock, and blues sounds was revolutionary. Fans were captivated by songs like Dazed and Confused and Good Times, Bad Times right away. Both Page's unique guitar work and the band's skill at fusing genres were on full display on the album. It was astonishing how quickly the band became famous. Unlike their peers, they were able to combine intricate compositions with powerful vocals and forceful guitar riffs. The awe-inspiring guitar solos by Page and the strong vocals by Plant made their concerts famous. Led Zeppelin became one of the most iconic rock bands of all time because their music touched people all over the globe. The band's sound was heavily influenced by Jimmy Page. He used effects like distortion and feedback, among other creative approaches, as the lead guitarist. He brought a fresh perspective to the guitar that helped shape the band's sound. Because Page was also the band's producer, he had a hand in crafting the recordings and making sure they conveyed the intensity of the band's live shows. Led Zeppelin II, their second album, was released in October of 1969 and featured some of Page's most famous contributions. Rock history was cemented by the album's popularity, which included some of their most memorable songs like Whole Lotta Love and Ramble On. Page's production work and guitar riffs played a crucial role in this achievement. The impact of Led Zeppelin on the music industry increased in tandem with the band's rising star power. Their innovative sound and groundbreaking live performances made them trailblazers in the rock music genre. Not only did their records redefine rock music, but their shows went down in history as unforgettable experiences. However, difficulties and stresses increased in tandem with the band's meteoric rise to fame. At the height of their glory, Led Zeppelin faced a number of obstacles that their fans didn't see coming. In the background, the band, and especially Jimmy Page, felt the brunt of the demands of stardom, constant touring, and the stress of upholding their rock star persona. When Led Zeppelin were performing at their peak, it was in the late 60s and early 70s. Their music was groundbreaking, and their concerts were unforgettable experiences that attracted enormous audiences. The strain was on, though, because of all this success. The band was exhausted from their relentless touring schedule, which took them all around the globe. Jimmy Page's mental and physical health suffered greatly due to the strain of being the band's primary motivator. The story of Page's struggle with addiction started to surface during this time of constant touring and great expectations. To deal with the hard lifestyle, it all began with the occasional usage of narcotics. While substance experimentation among artists of the day was widespread, Page's struggle with what began as occasional use escalated into a major issue. Substance abuse symptoms first appeared in Page in the early 1970s. Subtle warning signals emerged early on in Page's addiction. He started acting differently, becoming less dependable and withdrawing from social situations. Everyone around him, even his bandmates, could see this change. The guitarist's mental and physical health had taken a nosedive due to his substance misuse. The gaps were widening, even if he tried to cover them up. The dynamics of Led Zeppelin started to change as Page's addiction became worse. Despite the band's legendary live performances, they began to encounter difficulties about this time. The entire quality of their concerts was diminished due to Page's unpredictable conduct, which became an issue during gigs. His bandmates would get frustrated because Page would occasionally be noticeably handicapped. John Paul Jones, Robert Plant, and John Bonham, who had a long history of productive collaboration with Page, became more frustrated by his unpredictable conduct. As time went on, friction developed between Page and the rest of the group. What started out as a fun and collaborative process for recording sessions quickly descended into chaos. Page's unpredictable conduct began to put a strain on relationships within the band, and his addiction made it hard for him to regularly contribute. It had a major effect on the music of Led Zeppelin as well. Despite the band's continued popularity, its studio albums started to show signs of internal strife. As Page battled his addiction, the creative process grew fragmented, making it harder to produce the high-quality songs that fans had grown to demand. The band's fundamental problems were still affecting them, even if they were still releasing successful albums. Led Zeppelin reached a turning point when the demands of fame and addiction became too much to bear. Internal strife was eroding their once proud dynamic and threatening to derail their progress. How were these obstacles going to be overcome? Did Page's battle with addiction spell the end for them as music legends? What do you think? The rock music industry saw tremendous upheaval and extravagance in the 1970s. While the rock movement was full of energy and excitement, it also had a dark side, the widespread usage of drugs. During this time, the drug culture greatly influenced many rock musicians, Jimmy Page included. The rock and roll movement of the era was characterized by a lack of inhibition. The use of drugs by musicians contributed to their image as rebels. In addition to their recreational value, they served as a means of escaping the monotony of traveling full-time and the glamour of stardom. Jimmy Page wasn't the only one engrossed in this society. Jim Morrison and Janis Joplin were only two of many of his peers who battled addiction. They turned to drugs as a means to cope with the constant pressures of being rock stars and to elevate their performances. Regrettably, what started as light usage of Page quickly became an addiction. The drug culture of the 1970s normalized excessive behavior. As a rock star, you began to identify with the late hours, drug usage, and partying. However, there was a price to pay for this way of living. Page was not alone in experiencing a heavy emotional and physical toll. The prevalence of health issues, irrational conduct, and damaged relationships rose sharply. The entire band of Led Zeppelin felt the effects of Page's addiction, not just him. As Page battled with his substance usage, the band's once legendary concerts became unpredictable. His health problems and unpredictable conduct frequently interrupted the recording procedure. The unity that had propelled their achievement started to crumble as hostilities escalated. There was a shadowy aspect to rock and roll that had everything to do with the narcotics and how they weakened the band itself. The internal strife within Led Zeppelin was casting a shadow on the band's hitherto immense popularity. As addiction took hold, the formerly dazzling image of a rock star started to fall apart. Even though they were once among the most famous rock bands of all time, Led Zeppelin eventually went through a tragic and devastating decline. The band's once meteoric climb to prominence took a dark turn in the 1970s, when Jimmy Page's addiction was spiraling out of control, and other unfortunate occurrences compounded the problem. It was in September of 1980 that Led Zeppelin took one of their biggest hits. Tragically, the band's mighty drummer John Bonham has gone away. He tragically passed away from asphyxiation after vomiting while under the influence of alcohol, which was a great loss for the band. Tragically, Bonham's death signaled the end of Led Zeppelin and was a personal tragedy for the other members as well. The band's energy and vitality had vanished, and they obviously couldn't carry on without him. Shock and grief characterized the hours following Bonham's passing. Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, and John Paul Jones, the three remaining members of Led Zeppelin, were profoundly impacted. They made the announcement that they were breaking up in December of 1980. This was a devastating setback for Page. He was left to face a feeling of loss and emptiness with the dissolution of the band, which had been his life's work. Page found it difficult to adjust to the abrupt absence of the band when they broke up. A watershed moment arrived with Led Zeppelin's disbandment. After Led Zeppelin's success, Page attempted to carry on with other bands, but nothing could compare. His struggles were made worse by his own struggles with addiction. After the band's breakup and Page's battle with addiction, his life took a turbulent turn in the years that followed. What transpired after that for Page, and what horrifying revelations have surfaced? Jimmy Page's addiction was a major hidden issue that his public persona as a successful rock and roll musician concealed. New details about his battle with addiction have shed light on this hidden fight. He put up a brave front as a self-assured rock star, but below that front was chaos. What little is known about his addiction makes its devastating impact on his well-being, imagination, and relationships all the more clear. New information shows that Page's drug abuse was more worse than previously thought. His physical health started to deteriorate as a result of his addiction. He appeared frail and weary all the time after losing a lot of weight. Those closest to him have spoken about how the stresses of his lifestyle contributed to his health problems, in addition to the narcotics themselves. His once vibrant presence was characterized by a perpetual state of exhaustion and sickness, which he experienced on a regular basis. The effects of his addiction, however, extended well beyond his physical well-being. Also, Page's mental health took a major hit. He exhibited irrational conduct and unexpected mood swings as a result of the chemicals' profound impact on his mood. He struggled to maintain a consistent performance and deal with the expectations of being in a top rock band due to his mental instability. The once inventive musician and producer started to have creative blockages. His substance abuse made it difficult for him to concentrate and work well with others. The once creative recording sessions were now plagued by delays and heightened tensions. As a result of his unreliability, Page caused friction within the band and slowed down their production. The effects of his addiction extended beyond his career. As a result, he became estranged from the people he cared about, and his personal relationships suffered. As Page became more and more reclusive, even friends who had been close to him began to withdraw. The people who had shared in his rock star glory days suddenly saw an entirely different side of him, a reclusive and emotionally distant individual. There was a marked decline in Page's rapport with his relatives. Eventually, he cut ties with those closest to him as his addiction progressed. Despite their best efforts, Page's family members were unable to connect with him due to his social isolation. The distance between them and Page continued to widen, and they felt powerless and irritated as a result. His inability to sustain any significant relationships was a direct result of the emotional toll that his addiction had on him. The devastating implications of Page's personal seclusion are well documented. It hindered his capacity to reach out to anyone who cared about him for assistance or support. He was more isolated and hopeless since the individuals who could have helped were kept at arm's length. In spite of having admirers and business associates around, the formerly famous rock singer ended up spending a lot of time alone, battling his addiction. Both his personal and professional lives were impacted by this period of solitude. His life became very chaotic and difficult to manage as a result of his estrangement from his family, friends, and bandmates. He faced a deluge of seemingly insurmountable obstacles brought on by the emotional and psychological burden of his addiction. Jimmy Page reached a crossroads in his life after a long battle with addiction. Even though he had a long and arduous path to recovery, he had begun a new chapter in his life. How, therefore, did Jimmy Page begin to make positive changes in his life? Page started to see the devastating effects of his addiction on his life and work in the late 1970s. Recognizing his need for assistance was the initial stride towards healing. It is known that he sought assistance from medical professionals and close friends, but there is no public record of him participating in a structured rehabilitation program. This was the turning point in his battle with addiction. It took time for him to get his life back together. Jimmy Page got his health and career back under control by doing some serious things. He prioritized his own health and happiness right away. He severed ties with his terrible past and fought tirelessly to heal physically and psychologically. This involved doing things like going to therapy and finding people who had been through the same things as you. Rebuilding his career was something Page began to do in the early 1980s. He took his time before re-entering the spotlight. He opted for a more controlled approach, balancing his health with his enthusiasm for music. Without the continual touring strain, he was able to express his creativity via collaborating with different artists on various projects. The band The Firm, which he co-founded with Paul Rodgers, a former member of Bad Company and Free, was one of his more prominent endeavors. With this new endeavor, Page was able to start again by experimenting with various musical styles and collaborating with fresh talent. Page was able to re-establish himself as a gifted musician with the release of multiple critically acclaimed albums by The Firm. When Page's old band Led Zeppelin got back together, he was there too. In 1985, he was a part of a legendary Live Aid performance alongside Robert Plant, John Paul Jones, and Jason Bonham, son of John Bonham. Both Led Zeppelin's history and Page's lasting brilliance were powerfully brought to light by this presence. Making music wasn't the only thing that helped him rebuild his career. He also needed to rebuild fences and win back the confidence of people who had been there for him when he was down. As an indicator of his dedication to leading a better, more balanced life, Page made an effort to get back in touch with old acquaintances, relatives, and co-workers. It became evident as Page began to rebuild his life and career that his road to recovery was a reflection of his perseverance and commitment. Jimmy Page's path through rock music is multifaceted and consequential. His incredible contributions to music have not been diminished by his struggles with addiction that he endured while Led Zeppelin was at the peak of their glory. In addition to his personal troubles, Page is recognized today for his huge effect on the rock world. Jimmy Page's impact is profound, even after all the trouble he had. His impact on rock music cannot be denied. Page was instrumental in shaping an era's musical style while playing guitar with Led Zeppelin. His groundbreaking use of distortion and feedback on guitar was a game-changer for rock music. The innovative style and technical prowess of songs such as Whole Lotta Love and Stairway to Heaven continue to get praise to this day. And Page was a master of production too. His mastery of layering and sophisticated composition was on full display throughout Led Zeppelin's albums, which expanded the genre's potential. The distinctive sound of the band, which fused blues, hard rock, and folk elements, was greatly influenced by him. Aspiring guitarists and producers continue to find creativity and inspiration in Page's work. A lot may be gleaned from Page's challenges, though. His struggle with addiction serves as a stark reminder of the negative effects that celebrity may have on an individual's health. The story of Page should serve as a reminder to fans and other musicians that it's important to seek treatment and support when experiencing issues like these. His story exemplifies how everyone faces challenges in life, no matter how gifted they are, and how important it is to persevere through them. Regardless of these obstacles, Led Zeppelin's influence on music history will last. Many musicians have credited the band as an inspiration, and its music has an enduring impact on fans of all ages. Classic recordings by Led Zeppelin continue to be played at concerts and on radio stations all around the globe. In rock history, Jimmy Page will always have a special position. His work as a producer and musician has made an indelible impression on the music industry. His personal problems were important, but they are not all that characterize his legacy. His creative musical style and revolutionary work with Led Zeppelin, on the other hand, are what really stand out and inspire people today. Looking back on Page's life, it's easy to see that his legacy is a blend of success and hardship. His life exemplifies the ups and downs of a renowned rock career, proving that one can overcome adversity to do great things and make a difference in the world. It is now the moment for you to respond. Your thoughts on Jimmy's life's trajectory are welcome. Tell us in the space provided. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel if you found this tale entertaining.